All right, great. Now we're recording. Yeah, by the way, congratulations on winning the awards, Pan African Awards. And I think to start us off, I'd just like to, well, ask you to share with me, what makes someone a Pan African?
That's a broad question. Pan-Africanism in its genesis, it is a response to colonization from the diaspora, particularly the Caribbean and the Americas. And it is a consciousness which is founded on repatriation, reparation, and restoration. In its genesis, the likes of Marcus Garvey, Martin Luther, Malcolm X, and many other revolutionaries were actually mobilizing to transport people back to the continent. And by the time the movement arrived in Africa, it rang a bell well with the revolutionaries. Why? Because the educated uh, Pan Africanists in the West who understood the first world, so to speak, concepts and had come in contact with the colonial systems in the West had an intellectual response to colonization as much as Africans had a physical response to colonization. So the African revolutionary picked up guns to go and fight, but the Pan Africanists picked up books and scholarship to go and fight the system. This is where you find the Henry Clark, the James Smalls, and the other Egyptologists, and many women in the background there who actually worked to that revolution. You find musicians such as Peter Tosh, Bob Marley, Ruth Rockers reggae. You should listen to the whole raga, which grew itself into the R&B, to rhythm and blues, literary poets, wherever the black men could find themselves, you begin to hear them echoing the songs of freedom. Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. We used to hear those songs and we used just to dance to the rhythm. But now, in our old age, when we listen to those songs, we actually discover that these were prophetic messages which are just becoming a reality in our generation. Become a Pan Africanist, therefore, means that you are educated enough to understand the systems which have colonized us. And to be a liberation or a revolutionary means that you are practically getting involved in your country in terms of turning the democratic Pan-Africanism into the revolution of changing the systems. I think that's where we are right now as Africans. So I would not want to say one must celebrate being a Pan-Africanist, an academic exercise. We can only talk about Pan-Africanism in the glove of nationalism and revolution that we can begin to implement change. I would not go further than Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traore, and the Sahel states, where now ideologies are being changed into a reality of transforming, not just cosmetic government, political, parliamentarian, legislative, rhetoric, but the real physical implementation of taking natural resources, production line, changing currencies, winning of the baby from the colonial banking systems, transforming the education, manufacturing and industry, fostering new relationships, breaking down the borders, throwing away old language mediums of learning and teaching. And ultimately, we begin to see Africans now joining towards the united Africa that we've always been talking about. So, yeah, in a nutshell, being a Pan Africanist for me and a revolutionary simply means that you are conscious to the problem and you are active in its transformation. I thank you.
By saying that, others picked up books, I think it also meant that they started thinking, right? And there are a couple of times where you said that, we have been given brains and we need to use them, right? And so, how does one think?
Personally, I am not for only for the formal education of just learning and then you can memorize some few quotations. When you are talking, you can quote Marxism, you can quote Franz Fanon, you can quote Kwame Nkrumah, you can quote the Lumumbas and the Sinkaras. But yes, important as that may be. But I would love you as a young man to visit the graves, to visit the sites, to visit the monuments, to visit the caves, visit the rivers, visit the mountains, visit the battlefronts, visit the banks, visit the insurance companies, visit the hospital, and then let your body tell you, let your mind tell you how you feel about those spaces. That's what I call resurrection, the ancestral memory. Because if you don't know what killed your forefathers, it will kill you also.
And I think we also need to do a great deal of, documenting ancestral knowledge, because there's a lot of it, not documenting it. And I think, unfortunately, some of it isn't being passed down, given what we now kindly consider to be education and living out ancestral knowledge.
It's not necessary. It's not necessary for us to pontificate the concept of writing. And yes, to our generation, it's important because we think that is the only way in which history and knowledge can be passed on. But don't get carried away. We have been here for millions of years as Black people. Our form of writing is different. We don't write on paper. We write on stone. We write on the heart. We write on the consciences. We write in our art. We write in our crafts. We write in our material. We write in our oral tradition. We repeat things to each other. Our information is not coded in books that can be photocopied, but our information is written in the blood that can be reborn. Hence, when you begin to see revolutionaries, when we see the pictures of the Sinkaras, the Steve Bikos, the Samora Machel, and when we see those pictures, everything that they represented, everything that they taught resurrects in us. So yes, the writing and the documentation is important, but even as we are doing right now, the recitation of these events, these historical events, the gruesome deaths of Gaddafi, Muammar Gaddafi, and many other luminaries. Then you find that when you look through the African art and crafts, you cannot say Africans cannot write. It is you cannot read. Not that our forefathers could not write. They wrote lots of things. All this information is engraved in our artistic expression. So that if you look at our dances, for example, from a Eurocentric perspective, these are just dances where Africans are lifting their legs and they are stomping the ground, doing some gestures, but this is a therapy, the community therapy, an energy phase. This is a releasing of negative energy, inhaling of the dust of the land. Remember, what is it that is in this dust? It is training for military strategies. Yes, it's very complex. It's a very complex as to how Africans have been able to take the drum and the kudu horn and rhythm and could actually use it as a therapy that not only works to position us in the community, but can also be turned very quickly into our military preparation. So we have been dancing, and when you look at South Africa, for example, and you see them dancing and running and toying, you may look and laugh and say, what is a bunch of these Africans lifting up their legs and stomping? But watch the space as that energy begins to sage itself. 1976, Sharpeville massacres, the Soweto uprising, all of that was done in song and in dance. You get to Zimbabwe, you hear those songs that were being sung during the Chiparengas, the dances that went with it. And then you marvel, our weapons are not just physical, our weapons are actually spiritual. Maybe as a Christian, may appreciate that verse for the first time that says our weapons are not physical, but our weapons are spiritual. And I think it's only us who can begin to understand that. I mean, you look at the Haka when they are doing when the New Zealanders are doing their preparation for rugby and they're doing that Haka dance. You can't say that is entertainment. That is a serious enchantment vocation, summoning of energy and strength, etc. So yes, when you begin to talk about ancestral memory, then you can only perform modern duties while you are singing and chanting songs of the past. For it is in the songs of the past that we can define our battle, define our reason for war, and we sing those songs in the tears of our ancestors, and we get energy and strength to challenge the systems and rewrite our own history. Ancestral memory for me is actually the gunpowder inside the bullets of our battle. I thank you.
Most of the times when we have conversations, we'll speak about what, what used to be better than what it is right now, right? But again, I think I want us to really focus on, for example, what are some of the things that we can try doing right now. I mean, sort of a guide on how to live an African life, right? And so that may be spiritual, right? That may be physical, that may be walking on the ground with bare feet, right? And so I think we could also start with the angle of spirituality, right? Because I think that's an area where you're really an expert, given your experience in theology and Christianity. So, what are some of the ways that we can practice African spirituality?
Very, very interesting question. And again, many times when people ask me that question, they are coming from a colonial religious narrative, which then gives them a timetable when to go to church, what to take with you to church, what clothes to put on when you go to church, what kind of music must you play when you're in church. And so when you begin to talk about African spirituality, people in a certain way are already working from a perception, a Eurocentric colonial religious expression. But what are some of the things we must be doing to be spiritual? In my own words, be conscious. Be conscious. Consciousness is not it's not religion. Consciousness is your interaction with the totality of nature and being aware of what is happening when you are doing that. So be it that you are sleeping, be it that you are eating, you are drinking, be it that you are going to the river, be it you are going to the mountains, be it you are harvesting herbs, be it that you are planting or you are harvesting, or greeting people in the morning. Are you aware of who you are and what you are doing with those elements that are near you? The African spirituality is not a religion, lifestyle. So what must we be doing? In one sentence, we must be conscious. We must be conscious. When we are drinking water, what are we doing? When we are touching the ground, what are we doing? When we are doing rites of passage, what are we doing? When we are burying each other, what are we doing? When we are married, what are we doing? So when you're killing cattle, killing sheep, also when you begin to look at it from that perspective, that's when you begin to see that the African is aware of his background, his history, and how connected he is to the nature that is around him and around her. So for me, it's not what we can do in terms of writing a program, but rather it is the doing in terms of how do we reorder our life? What are we dressing on? What are we putting on? What are we eating? Who's healing us? Who's healing our music? Are we listening to? What movies are we watching? The consciousness, what houses and types of houses are we living in? The consciousness for me has to do with that. When it is not raining, what do you do? What ceremonies do you do to evoke? I mean, right now in the Middle East, they do seed planting. It's not a new technology. Africans have been doing seed planting for the longest time. We actually have the technology of calling for the rains. So for asking me what we must do, maybe the real question is how must we live? Then we need access to the rivers, we need access to the forests, we need access to the mountains. For we cannot practice African spirituality in the absence, the natural habitat, which becomes the connecting cable between our existence and those that have gone before us. We are creating generations that will come after us. I thank you.
African spirituality indeed is a way of life. And so, can one practice African spirituality and be either Christian or Muslim?
Those are two conflicting ideas, three conflicting ideas altogether. Because in practice, whether it is Christianity or it is Islam, it's founded on the culture of the background in which the interpreter of the text is coming from. So, to be a Muslim, for example, you need to learn Arabic, you need to dress up like a Muslim, you need to eat like a Muslim, you need to die like a Muslim, you need to marry like a Muslim. And before you die, of course, you must take some money and go to Saudi Arabia and walk around that black stone. And, then you're a good Muslim. To be a Christian Catholic, must do your pilgrimages to Rome, must also do your church meetings weekly, bring your tithes and offerings, and speak a little bit of tongue here and there, Holy Ghost, and then get married in a white dress and put some stupid little ring on your finger, and then say you're married. So both Christianity and Islam, they bring with them the practices which are of the culture in which the one who is propagating the message is coming from. Or be it a missionary way of looking at things, be it a Muslim way of interpreting things. Had we been colonized by the Chinese, maybe all of us have been Buddhists. Had we been colonized by the Indians, maybe some of us would have been Zoroastrianists or believing in some Indian god or something like that. But because we're colonized by the British, we can't say we're Christians unless you have a recipe of how to change a goat and make it a sheep.
I think the effects of colonialism really run deep because right now it feels almost illegal to say that you believe in African spirituality and you're not a Christian or Muslim.
Yeah, you can only believe in what you don't know. That's the problem. I don't have to believe that I'm Maponga. I know I'm Maponga. The very same text that you are coming from that will say world perishes for lack of knowledge, not for lack of faith. But all our churches are actually faith-based organizations instead of knowledge-based organizations. There's a big difference in that. That we have hypnotized people in religious spaces to believe some God who is in the sky must be coming back and postpone all our responsibility in the present time for the future that is coming. It's actually total negligence in its highest order. For while you're waiting for a pie in the sky, what are you doing between now and that pie in the sky? And for me, religion becomes very toxic when it comes to the revolution, because then religion then teaches you to give the other cheek. It teaches you to pray for your enemies. It teaches you must wait until God comes back. He's the one who will bring justice and vengeance and etc. But while we are busy praying and etc., they're digging minerals and ripping the continents apart and calling it a third world. So how good is your religion if it leaves you in poverty and only gives you its faith as your wealth? And giving birth to children in poverty. If God wanted us in heaven, why did He put us on earth in the first place? So we must not over fantasize this religious, eschatological, utopic, or parasite kind of mindset, which is all postponing responsibility in the sweet by and by for a castle in the air. If God wanted us here, then we must be here. And we are here to transform, to change, to occupy. And there's no excuse that we can leave Africa to become a dilapidated state of second-hand quality of brains while we become first elders in our churches and we drag each other with unpractical biblical experiences and theological hermeneutics, which contravenes itself. Even the issue of peace must be read in context. The whole of the Old Testament and New Testament, it is founded on war. It is God killing the Palestinians and the Hittites, the Jebusites, and the Ammonites. He gives his children, his favorite children, the land which belongs to other people. So we have actually a God of the Bible who is portrayed as a tyrant, who has his favorite children and he push other children to give preference to his favorite children. So is it not true that the whole Middle East is not a war that is happening there? It's a religious genocide that is happening there, where in the name of God, in the name of Yahweh, in the name of the promised land, in the name of the chosen nation, in the chosen nation, the permission to butcher and kill everyone else. Why doing it? Because God likes it. God approves it. God is made us and that. Well, I don't have a problem with your God. We've done that to you. But can you ask your God what is his agenda with me also as an African? We appear anywhere in the agenda items of God as priority. And if you and your God have priority, then stay there. Me and my God as an African also, we are over here. That's fine. And you must not be afraid, uh, the African who finally discovers that he has been excluded from the text. Instead of being the subject of the text, he has become the object of abuse. I thank you.
So if you're a Christian or Muslim, it means that you have abandoned the African culture. And so part of saying that you're adapting African spirituality is saying that, you're also adapting the African culture, right? And I think right now we have adapted a culture that isn't African. And I think maybe in a way that is why, discussions and conversations around religion are so sensitive topics to a lot of people. But the question is, how do we start making them making them okay conversations for us to have them without necessarily feeling guilty about having such conversations and even thinking about them?
You cannot sit in 2025 and pontificate the whole idea of we need to have civilized conversation. We have adapted. No, man, this is a project, a violent project. Colonization came with its own politics, came with its own jurisdiction and governance systems, came with its own educational structures, came with its own religion, came with its own God. So it's a composite project that has been executed meticulously. And for Christians and Muslims to begin to look around and say, it's a sensitive subject. There's nothing sensitive about it unless your eyes are blind to the blood that flows through the pages of the Bible and through the graves of our ancestors. There's nothing sensitive about that. That actually Germany would be paying more than 82 billion into Israel for the genocide, and the same countries such as Britain and Germany and France are not willing to pay a dime for the murderous activities that they've been doing in Africa for the longest of time. So which part of that is sensitive? Which part of that is sensitive? That you can say you cannot address this thing because it is a sensitive subject. It's a sensitive subject when Africans have become custodians of the very system that has destroyed them for years. It's almost like telling me that, oh, it's sensitive to kill a snake that has eaten up your children and eaten up your chickens. How sensitive is it? How much more polite can you be to someone who has murdered your mother, raped your sister, burned your house, poisoned your rivers, and now digs up your ground and lives halls and halls of unrehabilitated land, and then they stock up the gold in the palaces in Britain and in France and etc. Then say it's a sensitive subject. There's nothing sensitive. Colonial project is a murderous, cruel project on the Africans. And at this day and age, we are no longer apologizing for nothing. For nothing. For crying out loud. It's time. And the fact that they were taking resources from Africa and bringing them into Europe here, why do they have a problem when we come into Europe? We are following our resources. So what did we think you were doing all along? When we were taking chrome and copper and gold and diamonds and uranium, moving it into Europe, where did you think the jobs were going to be coming from? As long as Europe constantly takes resources from Africa, they cannot stop the migration of Africans into Europe. We have the skills, we've been saying. We are coming here to work. We're following our resources. So I don't apologize for anything. It is what it is. And maybe it's high time that the Western world must wait. The want Africans here, stop taking their resources. Build the industries and factories on mainland. Look at what Troy has done, the uranium, in terms of creating power stations and etc. And when Africa starts industrializing, Maybe the third world will become the first world. We are going to see migration of Europeans coming to Africa for employment. That's what it is all about.
Speaking about Traore, I mean, I think he's someone that is widely celebrated by a lot of Africans right now. I think exactly because he's doing what you have just spoken about, right? I mean, industrializing Burkina Faso. And the challenges are a lot. I mean, he's receiving backlash from even, I would say, his own people, because I mean, Africans are his people, right? And the closest we have there is Nigeria. And we're also seeing grounds of him misinformation going around. And I think as a way to later discredit him and whatever is that he is doing in Burkina Faso. And so having individuals like Traore who show us that, you know what, it's possible and it can be done, and he's actually doing it is such a motivation.
Propaganda, lies, even regime changes have become the order of the day. I mean, as of today, if not yesterday, we just saw one of the most embarrassing events on national broadcasts around the world, where Donald Trump follows Ramaphosa into the Oval Office with evidence that Afrikaners are being killed in South Africa. Then he goes on to pull pictures of the genocide, but those pictures are from Congo. How much stupid can all president of America behaving like a toddler, totally misinformed, and based on that misinformation, sends an aeroplane to South Africa to go and airlift Afrikaners. The question is, during apartheid, during Chimrenga, during the genocides of Germany that were happening in Namibia, murders that have been happening in Moi, 25, 30,000 soldiers of Zimbabwe that were killed in Moi and Machpanda and in Mozambique. Did America ever send a bicycle, come and lift people being victimized? I mean, what a audacity. After you've done wars in Vietnam, Afghanistan, in Syria, that you can be sending an aeroplane into South Africa. I mean, you have enough problems you've created already. If you're really serious about helping people, maybe start in Vietnam, go to Guatemala, try Cuba, go to Syria, Afghanistan, and go to Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and pick up all those people that you bombed with the hydrogen bombs and rehabilitate those children that up to now they're paralyzed, some of them limbless. Children that are born without limbs as a result of your nuclear weapons. So what kind of mercy can you be saying you're showing? But of course, Trump has played his card. Now we know that the colonial system, together with its Eurocentric pigmentation, they support each other and protect each other. And in the face of their warmongering, they would pretend to love and protect the Afrikaners who are in South Africa when they're involved in more than 90 wars around the world. What more do you want to know? I mean, right now we have a Langley army commander who is supposed to be running AFRICOM with a clear mandate to eliminate Ibrahim Traore. Who talks about this? And we have it on record. And also, just like Trump lying through his teeth, that Traore is taking the gold to protect himself. And go to hell. When Traore went into parliament, there was not a single gram of gold in the reserve bank. Nothing. He's built that reserve bank and central bank from scratch, from nothing. Why must America now be worried that Burkina Faso is beginning to build its own wealth base? In fact, why bother about some third world country that is a junk state? Is it not Trump the other day who said that Africa is a zero hole? So what are you doing on the zero hole? What are you looking for? If we are all shitholes, then what is Trump doing in the shitholes?
Raises a very important question.
Maybe we can ask what is it that is found in those holes that he's looking for? Or maybe he is the product of those holes himself, but the quality of his speech can justify what I'm saying. The level of misinformation is appalling. BBC, American News, Sky News, CNN, all these machineries, if I had power in my hands, I would pull off those plugs from the wall. We've been eating this garbage and junk of what they call news for the longest of time. Time for truth, time for honesty. Anyone who wants to engage with us as Africans, we better have his story straight and respect us as citizens of this world. And the first item on the United Nations is to do with sovereignty, self-governance. So why must the African not be given permission and space to be himself, and decide what he must do with his own resources?
Those are very important questions. And I think right now we are seeing the power of social media because a lot of people can now do their own research no matter what is being presented to them on the news, right? I think just like what you said with Trump and the copies that the documents that he had, right? And saying that some of these pictures were from Congo, right? And again it shows forward it goes forward to show the power of this of misinformation and the consequences that it can cause.
Not only misinformation. I mean, if you can go back a few years back and you hear the British government, the French government, and the American government cooking evidence on Saddam Hussein that he has weapons of mass destruction. La 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 la. I was here. I was living in London during those years, 98, 99, 2000, 2004. And I remember every time people dressed up in those white little masks, they're supposed to be walking around Baghdad. They found evidence that there is weapons of mass destruction coming. Then walk back a few years later and hear George Bush and Obama, so the other world leaders, John Major and Boris, beginning to admit one by one that actually no, we did not find weapons of mass destruction. But did they not destroy Iraq on the propaganda that there were weapons of mass destruction? So misinformation has been used as justification of cruelty and inhuman behavior around the world. So the West can lie. Like even now, propaganda that begins to raise around Traore, they start mentioning it slowly. No, this man is violating human rights. He has created chairs, shock people and kill people. He is non-democratic. He is a dictator. He is what? Sooner or later, Gaddafi is killed. Why? Because he is not a good leader. Go to Libya right now. You will find that Libya has become actually a slave market. We actually have people who are being sold in Libya as slaves into the Middle East and a once glorious country. And on the basis of propaganda and the lies. The question is not just the lies, what impact. But when those lies are spoken long enough, what do they do in the minds of West to justify the genocides which they can conduct based on lies? And no one will hold them accountable. And this whole thing of the ICC, the International Court of Justice, whatever, what a waste of time. If for once we could take up George Bush and Obama and the, the British monarch, we need to take them to the Hague and they can answer for some of the crimes. I mean, even right now, while I'm in London here, I'm going to the Natural Museum with more than 18 of our kings that have beheaded and they're sitting there in the museums as trophies. And I hear the other day some of the are being sold on eBay and Amazon, artifacts for private collection. All we're asking for is just return these bones and let's bury our ancestors in dignity. Who talks about such things of inhuman injustice? 25,000 head in Germany of the beheaded Namibia. Who takes Germany to the Hague? Of course, they're willing to pay the Jews because they are white. Who bothers about blacks? Because they are uncivilized, they are savages, but they don't deserve justice. Of course, mercy without justice is continuous oppression. I thank you.
That's a really packed up explanation of information and the age of technology and the power of information, the power of misinformation, and what it can really do. Because I mean, can literally destroy a nation, right, and bring it to its knees. So for leaders such as Traore, right, and I mean these are leaders who are doing a lot for their own people, and obviously they're leaders that the West they don't like such leaders in Africa, right, and And again, we have seen what happens to such leaders, right? And there seems to be deliberate efforts to bring him down, right? And so, what should we be doing to avoid that from happening again?
In one way or the other, we need to start unplugging from the matrix of lies. We need to start reforming our educational institutions so that we can produce more industrialists, more manufacturers. And I would not find a better example than that of China, that we have been controlled for the longest of time by these lies of intellectual property. But does not know that Gucci, Giorgio Armani, YSL, even the American dollar itself is founded on the plagiarized symbols of the Great Pyramid of Africa. Now, who pays for the intellectual property? So China goes into Germany, goes into Britain to buy yellow fleets and all those big trucks. They take them to their universities and rip them apart. Then they produce their own. We call that reverse re-engineering. And I think that if Africa can begin to think in that direction, it could get something started. Be it cars, be it IT. I mean, who knew that some of these expensive Louis Vuitton bags that we are buying for $60,000-$70,000 are actually worth $10 or $15? Who knew? The whole branding, clothing, technology is founded on lies of cheap labor. And, and I think China has opened up a very interesting window that as Africans, we can also begin to take our own resources and raw material and convert them into final products. The entire value chain, be it in cosmetics, clothing, food, machinery, IT, and we could begin to feed and stop the leakage, brain into the industrialized world as the Africans are now beginning to maximize on that. And while we're on that, again, you want to consider the mischief of universities and academic institutions and technological platforms which come into Africa every year and they harvest the top brains in the continent, on the continent, in the name of scholarships. You want a scholarship to Waterloo, a scholarship to Cambridge, got a scholarship to Massachusetts, got a scholarship to Chicago University, ships into Washington, D.C. So what do you expect when you have taken the best out of Africa, that the junk that you have left at home here can do better? Because 60 to 80% of all the doctrines that are hanging on your walls, African brains, we have written those dissertations, but they would never see the light of day. When those scholars have died, those ideas are taken into developing those first world countries. So there's mischief also in terms of brain theft. And that's where the IP is sitting. So what must we be doing? We need to start appreciating our own resources, building up young people who can actually see how to convert our raw materials into final products and possibly create a new economy around beneficiation for natural resources. Thank you.
I mean, industrialization is very, very crucial to our economies. But the question is, how many governments do we have in the continent that are actively supporting that and creating policies that favor that?
We don't have governments that support that because the quality of people who have in government are your type of quality, which still needs to be educated, which still needs to be decolonized. So what do you expect with a boy who grows up and goes to a multinational school, speaks a little bit of English here and there, and loves rugby, loves cricket, puts on a tie with a bottle of champagne and a bow tie, and likes dinner parties and high teas? What do you expect when they are actually graduates of Cambridge, graduates of Oxford? When they come back to Africa, why do you call them Africans? After you've brainwashed them for 25 to 30 years. And they come back as presidents of Malawi, speaking lots of good English, but implement nothing. So you cannot be talking about government when you cannot talking about the quality of the leaders we have in those governments. A different breed altogether. We need to start teaching, training, developing, educating, re-educating, learning and unlearning to produce the quality of an African leader who will fully appreciate understanding the history of where we are coming from the future to where we are going to the global village. The question is what systems must we be putting in place in the now so that we can be able to harness the future with confidence. So we don't need new Africa. We don't need a new Africa. No, Africa will never be new. We need new Africans, different kind of mindset, a reset.
And we also need to put in systems that would help us get such leaders. Because I think unless we have such systems, we are really never going to have leaders that we had, like earlier on in the days when we were fighting for independence. And I think now we also need a second wave of independence, which is economic independence.
When China is producing 500,000 engineers every year, Africa is producing 3 million evangelists and preachers every year. So you tell me what industries you can build with pastors, except that they've built factories we call churches for their own gratification. So again, our obsession with religion has become a disadvantage to industrialization and development. Instead of working, we are praying. Instead of inventing, we are worshiping. Instead of building brands, we are writing logos for churches. And how to buy a factory and convert it into a church. And then you call people into the church to pray for employment. How does that work? I'm asking you, how does that work? How does that work?
We have way bigger problems than we think we do.
How does that work? That we can buy a factory and then you make it into a church. And then you call the community to come and pray for employment.
You might be right saying such a thing is foolishness. And religion has been deeply rooted in our subconscious minds such that we believe that it's the answer to everything, and we even throw our brains out the window because it doesn't make any logical sense to say we're building more churches and we want more jobs and we want to elevate ourselves from poverty. And so it really never works. But the question is, why do we keep entertaining it, which we shouldn't? And so that's why I think we have way deeper problems than we think we do. And really, some of them are psychological problems. Like we are sick, given what we are doing.
Even on the same breath, if we should say that religion is the answer some of our problems, the question, and we say Jesus is the answer. What is the question? What is the question? You can't tell me is an answer when you cannot give me the question. So what does Jesus say about my land? What does he say about exploitation? What does he say about theft? What does he say about genocide, crimes, murders? What does he say about sponsored coup d'etats, poisoning of food, vaccination? What does Jesus say? If Jesus is silent at the massacre of the Africans, then he can't be an answer to nothing. Show me a religion that is concerned about my welfare and well-being. And I'm amazed at considering the usefulness of that kind of a religion. But other than that, a tool of colonization and perpetual oppression.
In addition to that, also inferiority complex. So I usually talk to my friends and I tell them, if Jesus saved everyone, then I would want to be saved by someone who looks like me. Because the moment I believe that I'm saved by someone who looks anything else apart from the way I look, then there is no way that I would ever think that I can be on the same level with that person. Because they're my savior, so they're always gonna be on an elevated angle.
You are very generous. Very generous in your speech. Well, already on the next level of being saved. Again, I come back. Saved from what? They're talking about Jesus makes you free. Free from what? Maybe let's go back to the very first question. Before you can celebrate that you are saved, saved from what? Saved from sin. Sin in what? For what? You are free. Free from what? I was oppressed by who? I'm now free from what? So political freedom does not come with our economic freedom. And our political freedom does not come with our spiritual freedom. So still, the Jesus sets you free concept does not hold. Because even in the midst of that freedom, oppression still rages, of course. Find intelligent one who wants to say, no, it's a spiritual freedom. You're free from the power of sin and the consequences of sin. Hey, don't bother me with some of that theological homiletic. It's not practical. Because 80 to 90% of all the prayers that are being prayed in the churches are caused by the same colonial system we're trying to deconstruct. So don't remove the cobwebs, kill the spider.
That way, I think it's also the moment that you come to terms with the fact that your family is gonna be against you, your siblings are gonna be against you, your relatives are gonna be against you, your community is gonna be against you. You're gonna be on your own, right? And I think it's such a fight.
Colonization is a thorough project which is trained and enforced. And in the absence, the one who introduced it, those that are custodians of it, who remain enforcing it on each other. So right now we have our own pastors, our own deacons, and our own family members who were brought up in these churches, were brought up in these religions. We have uniforms and Bibles that were left for them by their uncles, by their fathers and mothers. And now when you tell them about how to transform themselves, they feel somehow they are spiritually connected to their parents. And that gives the reason for their resistance. But whether we have them or not, the revolution is here. And we will teach, we will teach, we will inform, we will raise consciousness, we will share the message and develop a new software that can liberate the continent. We cannot look at this after 400 years or 500 years of this colonial information and the damage that it has caused. That we can constantly be dealing with colonial system with golden gloves and woolen gloves. If we are afraid that if we touch the subjects of Jesus, then Jesus will kill us. He has killed our forefathers already. How much more is important our life? Because our forefathers apparently did not believe in Jesus. That's why the colonialists were given permission to kill them. Right now, we have 60% of Africa is Christians, but we're still dying. So how much more blood does Jesus want before he can set us free? How many more people must die before Jesus can be satisfied that, okay, now they believe? Now the whole continent has become Christian and we become better. Maybe when we did not have Jesus, we were much better. We built the pyramids of Giza in Sudan. We built the great Zimbabwe. We built when we did not know it. We actually did some serious stuff here on the continent. But ever since we arrived here, Africa has not experienced one day of gunshots and bullets and murders. And what a shame when some of these murders are actually happening in the hands of Christians who run around and say, in God we trust. We trust what? We trust to kill, to kill Africans. Is that the God that you trust? We even have a common Catholic priest walking around the soldiers and putting holy water on guns and bombs on their way to go and butchering the Africans. Is that the kind of religion we're talking about? Your brothers and sisters who would be laughing at you and pulling you back, are they fully aware of the level of brainwash that is going on in their minds? The revolution is real. The brainwashing is real. And the transformation is also real.
How many generations is it gonna take for the transformation to start, well, yielding results? Because it's a long process.
It took us 400 years to get here, young men. 400 years. And in a typical young man's voice, you cannot be looking for short-term solutions to a long-term problem. So we better be forward thinking. We better be long-term thinking. Better be looking at permanent solutions. And in Africa, if I was in the African Union or in the African government, I might also be starting to think, what kind of an Africa do I want to create another 100 years from now, 200 years from now? So don't be telling me about Project 2063 and 2030. Such a short-term thinking, which is based on actions every 5 years. To yield very little result. They're looking at what are we going to be doing 500 years from now, 10 years from now. the Egyptian pyramids and Giza and etc. Because people are still here 13, 15, 20,000 years later. Their history still looks us in the eye. So the question is, what kind of an Africa are we creating that our grandchildren will be able to see in the future? And that's the kind of leadership, that's the kind of young people who are looking for, those kind of inventions, technologies. Look at it. That will shape not only the present, shape the very future for us and our children, and influence the rest of the world. Permanently. The sciences of Africa form scholars of Europe, Plato, Aristotle, informed the mathematics of the world. Pythagoras theorem. It informed the geometries. It informed the architecture, the mining. So way ahead of our time. On another day, we will discuss how do we preserve that so that our children can find it. That's why there is such an obsession with digging the pyramid. Biology. So people looking for the science which constructed these monuments, looking for the tool, the navigation tool, levitation tool. How to lift up these rocks that are weighing thousands tons of, and those rocks can be found within a space of 100, 200 kilometers from where the construction is happening. What kind of science did they use? Using their modern minds, they were thinking so many men do these things on. No, stop guessing. There is a science of levitation where music and vibration could be used to cut things, laser kind of equipment, and lift these stones across hundreds of kilometers and position them with precision. Those sciences will make all modern industries and technology look like a game.
We really do underestimate ourselves as Africans, and what we are capable of, and what we have done before, and what we can do right now.
Is it not amazing when you hear the sciences that have around Africa? You can just Google number on your YouTube and find out just the innovation in Africa, young people, young men and women, new ideas. I mean, I've seen young boys coming up with robots, no power, nothing that can lift up things and etc. Other boys are making helicopters out of wheelbarrows and the motorbike engine. The other boys found power that can be found in rocks. Now you can actually power and currency right there. The other boy in Zimbabwe found some radioactive frequency that can power a car. And with almost 20 to 30% of the youngest population in Africa, which is below the ages of 18 and 19, for me, that is the future. Italy, Germany, and France, and they are all retirement aging home. Those old people are on their way out. The leader is a graveyard. Future, therefore, is our human resource. Must never buy this rubbish from the West that we must not reproduce. Because when you stop reproducing, we are killing the potential of our future, which is our children. Innovation sits with the young. They are beginning to come up with solutions to solve their problems.
It's such a brilliant thing to see, really, right? But again, the challenge is that in as much as we have a lot of brilliant young minds across the continent, we still don't have systems that support them, that enable them, right? And so there are times where you'll find such talented individuals leaving the African continent, yet this is the very talent that we need to keep in the continent. And so, in as much as we have young people who are doing incredible things out there, I think it's also really important to consider the support that they're receiving, and how, I mean, everyone else can really help support them in whatever it is that they're doing, and not just letting them be on their own, such that they have to find other alternatives. And sometimes they decide they go to other countries, or they're poached by other country for that matter.
You don't have to cry as a young person because you need to understand that the system was not built for you. And for a simple reason, it was not built for you. And whereas it was not built for your development, the educational system was built as a factory yard, cheap labor. So I don't know why you should expect your government and your institutions in Africa to support your innovation, not in their blood. The governments of Africa don't have it in their DNA to harvest indigenous knowledge, to harvest innovation, to create factories and create industries. They actually legislative frameworks make sure that innovations are not seeing the day of. I mean, who the hell do they think they are in bringing these herbs and fixing up our stomachs and fixing up our bodies for thousands of years? When you take some of those herbs and you put it in a bottle and say you want to start selling it, it will take you more than 5 years to get one drug approved by the very same bodies and pharmaceutical companies that are making money out of your sickness. So they think that they will approve your drug which will cure cancer when in their budget they're actually expecting to make 20 to 50 billion out of selling the very drug cancer which they have created. It does not take astronomical science to understand that system. So don't even begin to cry that governments don't support. Did not make those governments. They were not made for you. They were not made by you. So why do you want them to support you? You need to start supporting each other. And our young men, when they start making money in Africa, unfortunately, again, because of the poor education they have, they take all that money they have made and take it to Dubai, take it into Europe, and give it over again to the same system that destroyed them. Instead of taking some of that money, begin to create industries and factories. They're drinking champagnes in Center, buying Lamborghinis and Bugattis, shipping Mercedes Benz cars, double convertibles, Phantom, Rolls Royces, and etc. In their heads, they think that these are emblems of success. How do you convert that kind of money into development? This is the role. This is the role of information creating. This is the role of patriotism. As we started off, all of Pan-Africanism joined evolutionary Africanism, whereby we can begin to see your education, your ambition, and your resources coming together to create those new products that can transform. We are also tired of being called third world countries. We are tired of drowning in the Mediterranean, trying to run away from Africa into Europe. We don't need another young person dying and running away from their own continent. Solution is in the problem. How do we, as elders, as government, can create a conducive environment which can offer our young people an alternative, a solution, not just a temporal one, but a long-term employment strategy that will see the retention, the harvesting, and the retention of those young people. Educated, develop them, train, force them, harvest what they have, change the society. The excess of that we can export to the rest of the world, either as products or as human resources or human capital. That recipe for me is what is lacking the transformation of Africa. We are busy photocopying thieves. We are photocopying thugs. We glorify political thuggery over honest work, where those that are stealing from the government are given applause. And someone who steals a loaf of bread to go and feed his children is actually deemed as a criminal. But the real criminal are those that are stealing the future of our children, giving away land to the Chinese, giving away land to whichever nationality at the demise of their own. Ghana's rivers being polluted with cyanide in search of gold. The future of those rivers when the fish and the people are now dying down. Get the big black hole, Kimberley in South Africa, Shurugwi in Zimbabwe, and see what the Chinese have done to the mountains of Shurugwi there and the dilapidated roads that are right there. Should we ignore? Should we be silent when De Beers is vandalizing Botswana? Should we be quiet? When Congo has become a dumping site of cyanide, should we be quiet? But of course, we all want cell phones. On the latest iPhone 16. The question is, where is it coming from? Are we concerned that actually what we are holding in your hand, there are 25, 30 young people who have died, and another 200 cheap labor young boys and girls who are deprived of education so that you can have your cell phone and your laptop? Who cares? Who cares for you, young boy? Who cares for you, young man? Who cares for you, young lady? And until we begin to take our capital, principally those that care for, let us still develop those gadgets and resources ourselves. We will be using our own resources to destroy ourselves. In fact, the resources of Africa, ways than one, have been a curse more than a blessing. Had we been poor, maybe we would have been living in much better conditions. But because we are rich in resources, it has ended up in our poverty. I wonder if it makes sense.
It does. Makes a lot of sense.
It must make sense in dollars and cents.
It must. It really has to.
I'm in London now for the next 3, 4 days. We're doing a London UK tour for Manchester, Birmingham, Bristol, and London with Mambokazi Aluko and Professor James Small for the PAC Pan African Congress, which is an African Pan African awareness campaign around reparation, repatriation, and restoration. So, if any one of your audience are in the London, UK space, they can, even the Caribbean, they can join us. It's only fair for us to rewrite our own history, our own generation. I thank you.